Welcome to episode 2 in my journey through the cheapest games Steam has to offer, in an attempt to find out if you really can get good games for next to nothing. It's a strange hybrid of review and experiment. This time we're looking at Splatter Blood Red Edition, which, as you can probably surmise from the title, isn't the friendliest game. It's a top-down zombie shooter with a full story mode, as well as a survival wave-based mode. The story follows the resident gruff-voiced anti-hero Max as he journeys through traditional apocalypse-ridden surroundings which occur whenever a zombie virus runs amok. After finding a village of humans just trying to survive, Max sets himself the task of ending the disease himself. It's all laid out in short cutscenes between the levels, which are black and white and occasionally using splashes of red to emphasise the blood, and narrated by Max himself, in a way which is eerily similar to Max Payne. Perhaps choosing the same first name isn't a coincidence. It doesn't particularly matter or not whether they stole the theme, but it's always good to try and mix it up a bit and make it your own. The only real issue with these scenes is that recording quality of the voices is pretty bad. The voices themselves aren't too bad, and the dialogue is suitably cheesy and fun. The game all starts out at Max's house when he's awoken by his doorbell ringing, shortly followed by a SWAT team smashing his door down and urging him to evacuate. The squad soon decide that that's far enough and tell you to pick up a pistol and you're thrown into the nightmare beyond. The controls are solid. You use WASD to move around and mouse to aim and shoot, and you do also get the ability to throw flares later on using right mouse clicks, as you learn that the zombies are scared of light for some reason. This is fortunate because the game is really dark and your torch doesn't really have the best reach. There's a good variety of weapons as well, and they're distributed well throughout the game. You quickly get your hands on a shotgun and a machine gun, but later get bulked up with some more exotic weaponry like a flamethrower and a laser rifle. Each weapon has its own uses, but I did tend to stick with a pistol most of the time as it has infinite ammo, and once you've thrown a whole bunch of upgrades on it, it's actually pretty good, as it fires triple shots and emits little flashes of light too. I will say that the cost for upgrades is pretty steep, but I suspect this is because the game is intended for multiple playthroughs. In my first playthrough I only managed to fully upgrade 2 of my weapons, even though I was focusing my upgrades on my primary use weapons. One of the great things about this game is the amount of variety that is thrown into the monsters you face up against, as you have the usual range of zombies, big, small, fast, blah blah blah, but you also get to face up against some weird jumping frog things, fire beetles and worm-like creatures which have to be killed with fire. And that's not even mentioning the bosses, which although aren't exactly unique, are at least varied, as you face a worm with weak spots which breathes fire, and even a possessed combine harvester amongst other things. It's quite refreshing to see a game which isn't afraid to break down the walls of reality and put whatever takes their fancy into the game, just because it makes it fun. At the end of the day, the most important part about games is that they are fun to play. There's also a ton of stuff littered through the environments which can be used to block, hinder, or even explode your enemies. I particularly like the use of little fireflies which create barriers that encase the zombies due to their fear of light, but if you make too much noise they disperse and let all hell loose. It also has a survival mode, which is your usual horde-based deal, and up to 4-player multiplayer, which you can customise the controls to let people play with just about any extra peripherals you've got lying about, as you can set the character to auto-shoot if you don't have enough buttons. Graphically it isn't going to win any awards, but it isn't exactly the worst quality I've seen. It's probably slightly smoother in some respects than Alien Shooter TD, which I reviewed recently. The sound effects are pretty standard, but the music when it kicks in is good, and the game is totally stable, which is a major bonus. The question here though is, can you buy good cheap games? And with Splatter I can quite happily say that yes you can. While it's not a genre-defining masterpiece, it never pretends to be, it just does what it set out to do, and it does it well. The shooting mechanics are easy to use, the lighting system is pretty good, and the story is surprisingly enjoyable. It's nice to see that when you're spending your 15p you don't necessarily have to put up with awful games, and you actually get a decent amount of game time here too. The main story took a little under 4 hours to complete. If you're looking for something that's simple, fun and cheap, I would highly recommend Splatter. Now we just have to see if we can keep the good cheap game ball rolling. See you next time.